All right, I had to unmute myself temporarily because it was yelling at me that it was yelling about that. All right, so hopefully all right, I'm going to give you all the power.
we see you. Yay. Would you like to check that you can share your screen? Okay. We just want to make sure that you know what it is.
It's fine too.
Browser.
Yes.
Okay, let's do that and make sure that the sound is going to work. You can play a YouTube video if you don't want to share slides. Yes.
Yes, I saw him. Yeah, and I said, in my mom said, I'm not quite sure why.
Yes. Is that the most top right that her box can go?
No, but we can make it so, give me 1 second.
Oh, sorry about that. You don't have to go through all these slides. Oh, okay.
Oh, that's good. They're on one side of the
Yeah.
on the other, that's perfect.
Oh, this is wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and then I'll go back and hide that. That's what we can do going forward.
So 1 second. From the state.
He's gonna play video?
Can you remove that? That's
Yeah, he's
okay?
gonna do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's play the YouTube video.
Long before cell phone videos turned everyone into citizen journalists,
Excellent. Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah, she wants to come back. Yeah. As long as she gets before she comes off. Yeah. We'll also come out here and make sure that one screen is the PowerPoint and that's the video. Because it might take 5 minutes once you get
Okay, Shannon, so
I might need access to this video from it. But I think we're good. Yep. Okay, I think you're good to go.
Sweet. Is it sharing?
I guess I didn't share it.
yeah, there's going to be a line and I'll say thank you and that will be yours.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I gave the first guys go
I think we can wait a minute. Last year?
Yes, the tested her, seemed all good, but yeah, I agree. I think we should wait like 5 minutes. Should I make an announcement to encourage folks to like fill in a little bit?
I don't know how many of those people are actually going to make it over here and how many are going to go to the overflow sessions with their coffee and their stuff. So I think let's just, I think it's all right for now.
Cool.
When it all goes horribly wrong, you can blame it on me. You're like, what? You said.
We'll be fine. I'm not too worried about it. Jessica, when you just like bop it and give me a thumbs up and the best doors closed.
Oh, when the doors closed?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you'll know that the doors are closed because I will come here and I will stay here for at least 5 minutes.
Sweet. Okay, folks. Hi. Oh, you can all hear me. This is wonderful. I'm a little soft-spoken. Can someone in the back give me a thumbs up to ensure? Awesome. Wonderful. Thanks. Okay, I guess we'll get started. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to commend all of you for being here online or in person on the very last afternoon of the conference. For those in person, I would especially like to thank you for not running off to the wonderful museums down in DC. And I would also like to thank everyone for not getting blown away during this morning's weather emergency. For those who have not formally met me, my name is Bridget Bukovich, and I would like to say both sorry and you're welcome for all of the emails and HUVA announcements. I'd also like to personally thank everyone for joining us in person and online for DH 2024. I've been part of the George Mason University community for 12 years now, and I've been part of the Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media for 4 years. And this conference really exudes both the spirit of the university and RRCH&M, and I have been blessed to be a part of it. As RRCH&M's Community Engagement Coordinator, it is my day job to democratize history by promoting the incredible work of the faculty, staff, and graduate students to people interested in learning about the past. This is my side plug. Please follow CH&M on LinkedIn, listen to our podcast at r2studios.org, or sign up for our newsletter at rchnm.org. Thanks. Really, please. I have some engagement goals to meet, and I would love if you could help me meet them. But in my role as local organizer for DH 2024, I've been honored to expand that principle by democratizing access to this conference for the global DH community. To make this work, in addition to the work of my fellow local organizing team, there have been a lot of people without whom this conference would have just not been possible. First, we have several amazing volunteers, both online and in person. One second, back. There we go. Both online and in person who have been supporting registration, tech, and several other odds and ends that make a conference like this possible. Thank you. In-person volunteers, if you're here, please stand up, whether you're in the auditorium or in the overflow rooms. And online volunteers, please go ahead and react with an emoji so we can know that you assisted online. Some of them are running and doing stuff, true. But awesome. And this is where I would really like to say that I cannot emphasize it enough that each of our volunteers have gone above and beyond for this conference. They have taken initiative on their own beyond what has been asked for them to help make it happen. One volunteer, I have to tell the story, and I promise it is epic. We were sitting at the registration desk in the middle of a session, and we had just realized that there was a serious tech issue, and the hybrid folks on Zoom could not hear. She happened to be walking toward us, and she looked at me and she said, "I got this." She proceeded to take off her stiletto heels and run barefoot all the way to the room and fix the tech issue. It was absolutely incredible. And again, it's just one of many, many examples of the fantastic volunteers that we have had for this conference. Volunteers have further stayed for extra shifts. They've made recommendations that have allowed us as LOs to tweak things along the way and help just make this conference experience so much better. And they've all just been generally wonderful human beings to get to know and work with. Please clap for them just one last time. And in volunteers, if you're standing, sit down now. I would also like to acknowledge the teams around the university without whom we could not have made this possible. Mason Catering, Event Services, Mason ITS, the operations team and cleaning crews for this building have been here super early in the morning and super late at night to make sure that things are running smoothly. Please give them a round of applause. Special thanks goes to our platinum sponsor, Digital Scholar, whose early commitment to financially supporting this conference meant not only that we met our initial fundraising goal far sooner than expected, but it allowed me to convince Jessica that we could in fact expand our food and caffeine budget. In all seriousness, though, Digital Scholar support to DH 2024 is incredibly important. So I just ask you all to give them one final quick round of applause. Now, before I pass the mic, I'm just going to take a few moments to say a few things on my own, a couple personal notes. First, I would like to take a moment to thank everyone here for making DH 2024 a crazy and wonderful experience for me. This is my first DH conference, and so I did not fully know what to expect, despite being on the LO team and doing a heck of a lot of work. But I can honestly say it has been a highlight of my 12 years at Mason and my past 4 years at our RCH&M. This conference is also really special to me because not many folks know, but I'm actually closing out my chapter at Mason in a few short weeks because I'm moving to Japan. So if you're joining us from Japan and have enjoyed DH 2024 and are looking for an event organizer, marketing manager, project manager, social media manager, I will be available very shortly. I would like to say that in advance, I'm sorry, I do not speak Japanese. I would like to make that clear. However, I do like to think that I know something a little bit about the digital humanities and this wonderful community. Again, thank you all for joining us in person and online, and thanks to everyone who made this possible. Turn it over.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's okay. Let's just find that. Yeah, this is special for me too, because it's the last official act as COP president that I'm performing, and it's a very, very special occasion, and I'm very happy to thank, on behalf of ATO and of all the CEOs, our local organizers, our local organizer team, and the program committee chairs and the program committee for the tremendous work that they put into making this wonderful event possible. So big thanks to our local organizing committee leads, Richard Bukovic, Jessica Otis, and Amanda Madden, and of course the entire local organizer team. And let's also thank the program committee chairs, Andrew Janko and Judge Karadziker, who are here, sitting in front. And of course, all the members of the program committee as well, from all the different CEOs. Yeah, and it's true. All these people and the people we just saw mentioned from the local organizer team, they made this success possible. Many, many thanks. There's one more little reminder that I would like to give you, because I just mentioned the CEOs, the constituent organizations of ATO, and you see them listed here. And I will not read them out, but I will read out their abbreviations, because ATO is an organization of abbreviations. ACH, AADH, Citizen, CenterNet, DARTI, DASA, DHD, EADH, Humanistica, JADH, KADH, Red HD, and TADH.
And one other thing that ADO does is welcoming new people and saying thanks to other people. So I'm Michael Sinatra, the co-chair of CenterNet, one of the constituent organizations, and I've got the pleasure of becoming the president after this event today. And welcome also Lauren Tilton from ACH, who's sitting in the second row, who will be our president-elect. This is a 2-year role, so you're president-elect for 1 year and then president the following year. And Tyne Sumner from our representative in Australia will be our new COP secretary. We also work very much in tandem with the COP executive and the EB board, where we are welcoming Mia Rich, who is in the room with us today, and Nicolas Sauret as our new EB secretary, and Nicolas Sauret as our new deputy treasurer. All of these, people have like more sort of important role that we have time to sort of say today, but I want to make sure that they all acknowledge the one coming in and the one outgoing. This is always a volunteer organization. Diane is always very keen, and it's very important to remind people that this is all people that are doing extra work on behalf of their respective CEOs and get involved in different levels. So obviously I want to thank, and I'll come back to Christophe in a second for his role as COP president, but also Quinn Dabrowski, who was, with Christophe and I for the whole year as COP secretary, and who was the ACH representative with whom we did a tremendous amount of work over the year, and Lydia McDavid, the chair of the awards committee, and Diane will tell you about one of the many things that Anne Diem oversaw with the Fortier Prize this year. Megan was our EB secretary, and then Miriam Pera-Pinanto, the conference coordinating committee. So that's the person who really helped shepherd this one. So we've got like more people coming in. And Martin Grandjean worked with Paul Arthur and the admission committee. So it's always the same thing you heard on Tuesday. We still are looking for volunteer, extra people. You had a wonderful time. You want to get involved. Talk to your CEO representative, or reach out to Diane as EB chair or myself. There's always something that you can do for ADO for that. And then briefly, I want to, sort of take, a few minutes to just thank Christophe. It's one of these strange jobs that you take on. You work as a community, and then ADO in the new format started, now 4 years ago, when Elizabeth Burr was our first president in the new form constituent organization board. And they sort of followed work with Isabel, and then Suzanne took over. Christophe was our 4th president, and arrived at a time where, as he put it last year, we had seen a tremendous change in the organization of ADO, but there was still much to do. And Christophe remained like a wonderful person to sort of work with throughout the entire year to really shepherd through many things that some of you don't know how much he was involved in the, implementing the new code of conduct beyond, the conference, or all the wonderful reviewing aspect in Conf Tour that was worked hand in hand with the EB committees. So a lot of work on that, but also making sure that this very large group of constituent organization, 13 different time zones, we were having, monthly meeting. Christophe was always, wonderfully sympathetic, but also very, very much on the ball, for moving us forward. There is that sense of both being sort of stern, but friendly, with a great sense of humor that, you don't always, sort of come across, but, there's a lot of that. And then, he was also very much already thinking, which is, something that you can say, like staying on. The first thing he said as he was about to step down is, if you need help, I'm still happy to sort of help out ADO in other ways. Because this is something that he put very much his soul and heart into it. So I want to do a big round of applause for Christophe's work. And because we work as a team between the Constituent Organization Board and the Executive Board, the rest of today's remarks on ADO's behalf will be done by our wonderful chair of the Executive Board, Diane Jakaki.
Great. Oh, great. Sorry. The slides I thought were out of order again. This has been my thing this week. Hello. My first set of remarks are not from me, so I'm reading to you what Anne McDivitt and Lady Anne McDivitt said to me. So this is her voice. I am not, or no, it's my voice as her. I am not Awards Committee Chair Anne Lady Anne McDivitt, who had to catch a flight before the ceremony. She asked me to represent her and the awards committee for this next section on ADO Awards. The Paul Fortier Prize is an award from the Alliance of Digital Humanities Organizations named for Paul Fortier, late University Distinguished Professor of French at the University of Manitoba in Canada. The award honors his long, active career in humanities computing and particularly remembers his kind encouragement and support for fledgling scholars in the field. The prize is given for the best paper by an emerging scholar at each annual conference. An author may be considered an emerging scholar for purposes of this award if, for example, they have not yet earned a PhD or having earned it within the last 5 years, they are positioned in an entry-level academic appointment at a university or junior position in an organization involved with the digital humanities, and/or they are new to digital humanities from another discipline or career. Current students are eligible for consideration if their paper is substantially their own work rather than co-authored by an established scholar. Multi-authored papers are acceptable if all authors are qualified emerging scholars and share the award. Through the course of the conference, 2 or more reviewers attended and observed each candidate presentation and made recommendations to the awards committee. Factors considered included research excellence, imaginative and/or innovative use of technology in support of scholarship, development or extension of research methodology, or contribution to the digital humanities in general or in some specific field of arts and humanities research. The awards committee would like to thank the reviewers who participated in this important process to acknowledge the work of emerging scholars at DH 2024. Your thoughtful comments and evaluations are greatly appreciated. What I would like to do quickly is recognize the people who were shortlisted for the Fortier Prize. If you had a chance to see any of their presentations, they were all excellent, and we congratulate everyone for this work. I would also like to recognize once again the people who evaluated this work. It is not easy to consider excellence in these different ways, and so thank you for all of your thoughtful contributions. But the Fortier Prize winner for 2024 is our Adam Clemens and Abby Norris Davidson. So if you are here, are you in the room? I guess on behalf of Adam Clemens and Abby, we will contact them and wish them congratulations and let them know about the significance of the award, and we hope that they enjoy it. So, all right. It's that day when everyone has to leave for the airport. It's always a shame. Okay, so next order of business. Just want to make sure. All right. We usually, in ADHA, we consider who will be the next conference organizers in what seems like reverse order. So we are going to, at first, announce who will be our DH conference in 2026. And then we will announce where we will, or you will be reminded where we're going next year. So if I may be so excited as to recognize that in 2026, DH 2026 will be held in Daejeon in South Korea. And I'd like to invite you up to tell us about the conference as it will be. We're so excited to be there. It's the first time the conference will be in South Korea, so this is wonderful.
Oh, sorry. I'm so excited. So, hello, my name is Jae-young Lee. I'm Associate Professor of Korean Literature at Ulsan National Institute of Science and Technology. And I'm a constituent organization representative from Korea. First of all, I would like to thank the program committee and all the CEO representatives and then the members of ADHO, especially Diane and Christoph, for having us today. And I'm really honored and I'm thrilled to introduce DH 2026 on behalf of KADH, the Korean Association for Digital Humanities. And then I'm also overwhelmed to think about the amount of work that I'm supposed to do in the future. Okay. The conference takes place in the city of Daejeon, Korea, and from July 27th to August 1st, and with a theme of engagement. And then we are preparing this wonderful event in collaboration with Daejeon Tourism Organization. Okay, over its 2,000 years of history, Korea has embraced and integrated various religions such as Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, Christianity, and developing a tradition that values the humanities and art. And modern times, Korea has rapidly advanced in the science and the technology, and particularly in the ICT sector, has built a robust internet infrastructures across the nation. So this combination of rich humanities tradition and innovative mindset toward the technology serves as a sturdy foundation for developing digital humanities in Korea. So as you know, Korea is a convenient travel place connected to the 154 cities in the 53 countries via international airport, and then accessible without a visa for citizens of 111 countries. And then it's well developed and affordable public transportation will help you easily within Korea. And then as the home of the Korean wave or K culture, Korea offers the popular tourist sites and then delicious food and then diverse shopping options and then vibrant nightlife and then interesting cultural activities as well. So the Daejeon is a key center of education and technology that reflects the innovative scholarship of digital humanities. As the fifth largest city in South Korea, with a population of the 1.5 million people, Daejeon is home to the 21 universities, 26 major national R&D centers, and over 2,600 high-tech industry companies. And then Daejeon's central location allows for easy access to the entire country. They're taking about 2.5 hours from by bus or train from international airport, and then only an hour from via high-speed railroad from Seoul Station. And the nearby Cheongju Airport also serves a direct flight from the several Asian countries. And then our local organizing committee currently consists of Dr. Jin-ho Park, who is also here, over there. And then Dr. J.B. Yu at Yonsei University, and me, and Lorraine Han, Director of Daejeon Tourism Organization. She's also present. And then Dr. Yong-soo Kim at Hallym University and Dr. Mi-sun Yoon at Suncheon University will serve as the program committee co-chairs, connecting ADO to local organizers. Daejeon Convention Center is the main venue, which is equipped with the high-speed Wi-Fi and air conditioning, and it can accommodate those with disabilities and dietary restrictions. We also plan to provide attendees with live AI translation and captions using the Wordly translation software, allowing on participation in their native languages. Our academic theme is engagement, highlighting our commitment to promoting diversity and inclusivity within digital research while addressing social concerns such as digital equity and an ethical application of AI. By including special sections dedicated to cultural studies, critical data studies, and heritage studies, we aim to recontextualize these fields within DH. We will explore such questions such as, how will machine learning redefine the human act of translating from the major to minor languages? How can we generate the high quality data on a smaller scale that is more open to interpretation? And then how can we explore the historical texts and artifacts more meaningfully through digital technologies? These questions will be addressed in each section, but we also welcome submissions covering a broad range of topics beyond these themes. With the generous support of Daejeon Tourism Organization, the Korea Tourism Organization, as major universities, we plan to lower registration fees. That's going to be good news. So in sum, Korea is a fun place to visit, and then Daejeon is a convenient place to travel, and we have intriguing and flexible conference themes for you to engage with, and we have lots of exciting cultural programs. So then interest in DH in Asia continues to grow, and we believe that we are in a very unique position to contribute our experience, energy, and resources to the global DH community. So please come to Daejeon in 2026. So as I conclude, I would like to let me share the short video introducing Korea and Daejeon.
Tell them they need to turn on the sound.
Oh,
They know?
okay, sound? Okay. Oh, so it's not working.
No, it.
Did it? I'm sorry. So our team will be outside of the room. So if you have any questions about Daejeon or DH 2026, just let us know. Thank you.
I was so excited I forgot to introduce Jaehyun Lee. All right, let me see if I can get back to the slides. This is different slides. This is not the slides. Closing. Here we go. Yeah, I think so. Do. I'm trying to see. Okay, that's not sharing. Yeah. Please hold. A member of our staff will be with you shortly. We're just holding you in suspense before DH 2025.
Resume the Zoom and share the Zoom. I don't know where it went.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's still sharing, but
But
going
it's, yeah, the
behind
screen
like
went away.
Oh, okay. Is it that?
It's,
this either that.
Okay.
yay! But now this one's not showing. Okay.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo, thank you. No, don't be sorry at all. Okay, so for our last act of the afternoon, may I introduce Daniel Alves, who will be telling us about next year's conference in Lisbon, Portugal.
So, hello everyone. First, let me thank you for the organizers and the PC chairs of this wonderful conference here in Washington. It was a pleasure to be here during this week. And now let me introduce you, because most of you already know that it's going to be in Lisbon, the DH 2025. But let me show you a little bit of our city and the venue for next year. So let's see if this works. So next year we welcome you in Lisbon, Portugal. In the previous version of these slides, I have made a little joke about the geographical position of Lisbon, but I will skip that part of you. Well, but we do have good food and good wine. Really old stuff there, and beaches nearby. Not tornadoes, but beaches. And a lot of sun. That's a promise. The Wi-Fi, we really don't promise that, but sun, that there will be a promise for that. So put in the agenda July 14 to July 18, 2025, and join us in Lisbon next year. We have a wonderful team that has been working for some months now, and will be working through all the next year, planning everything. They are not all here, there are more, but this is the executive committee from 4 major universities in Portugal. The venue is on my university, Nova University of Lisbon, the School of Social Sciences and Humanities. The venue, the main building looks like an open book, so the architecture says, and we believed him. So, and it's an open university, indeed. It's open to the arts. This mural was done a couple of months ago. It's open to democracy also. This is a picture of one of the major captains that led the Carnation Revolution in Portugal in 1974, who brought us democracy, and it's in the one of the walls of the university, and is open to diversity also. So this is not generated by AI. This is a real picture of a real researcher in our facilities. It's university also open to knowledge transfer, or just to relax, of course. You can enjoy any of these in Lisbon. Our students say that we have a garden with a school inside, not a school with a garden. Don't know if it's a positive thing. Probably they spend more time in the garden than in the school, but it is what it is. And we hope next year the garden will be full of digital humanists. You can contribute to catching some fruit there, because there are some fruit in the campus. So this is strange, but can think, talk, and share about the main topic of the conference: building accessibility, open science to all citizens. So come to Lisbon, come to Nova FCSH, come to Digital Humanities in 2025. You all are welcome.
What was really amusing was to stand back there, and when Daniel gave the dates, all of these people picked up their devices and either took a picture of the slide or started adding the dates to the device. We're keeners. Okay, I believe to introduce, I'm handing it off to Andy and Judge, but what I would like to say in closing is there are a few of us in the room who know how hard it is to do this, and you have done an amazing job this past year, and we're truly grateful. So thank you.
All right, well, thank you for joining us today to welcome our final keynote speaker. This week's, it just completely flown by, but it's all been recorded, so you can come back, you can rewatch things as many times as you like. We hope that you feel enriched from all you've heard, even if many of you need a nap right now. I passed out a bit yesterday, but not yet. We've got one more thing, and over the course of the week, we've clearly grown as a community. Fellow colleagues are checking that virtual attendees can see the slides and participate in discussion. There's a learning curve, but we're clearly moving forward together. A fully hybrid conference is reinvention in practice. In the article, The Circus We Deserve, a front row look at the organization of the annual academic conference for the digital humanities, past conference organizers remind us that the issues in our field, quote, will not be solved once and for all overnight, but will require ongoing vigilance and monitoring to be sure that the big tent of DH is as open to all as it can possibly be.
We invited Professor Shannon Mattern to speak on the topic of reinvention because she has a unique way of making sense of big problems and finding footing when everything seems in flux. Shannon Mattern is the Penn Presidential Compact Professor of Media Studies and the History of Art at the University of Pennsylvania and the Director of Creative Research and Practice at the Metropolitan New York Library Council, which, by the way, is a job they created just for her, rightly so. She has contributed to public design, interactive projects, and exhibitions there. In 2025, she will be in the Kluger Chair. She'll be the Kluger Chair in Modern Culture at the Library of Congress. You can find her in one of the most organized and creative spots on the web at wordsinspace.net. But for 40% of her life, she has served in the Department of Anthropology and the School of Media Studies at the New School in New York. She has written books about community-oriented urban intelligence, media archaeology, and information infrastructures. She contributes a column about urban data and mediated spaces to Places Journal. One of the last classes she taught at the new school was redesigning the academy, where, and I quote, students created speculative syllabi and curricula, composed manifestos and creative pitch decks, and designed other pedagogical materials and epistemological infrastructures to assess the state of the American academy and imagine it otherwise. Generations of students have benefited from her astute and candid observations on the academy, as will we today. In this talk, Shannon will inspire us to let the possibilities we dream about be the ones that we work towards. Thank you so much, Shannon. I hope we can get you up on screen. Yes, you have been made the co-host. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay, hi everybody. Can you hear me?
We see the browser.
Okay, can you hear me though? Can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
Let me stop audio.
We did do
Can you hear me
the check. Everything worked then.
Can you hear me now?
Some of you saw it. There's eyes.
Can you hear me now?
No, we can't.
No. Okay, what about now? Can you hear me now?
We hear you. Give us a second to have your slides up as well.
I am pulling them up. Yes, I'm doing that right now. For some reason, though, I cannot check share sound for the slides, so I'll probably just skip the video.
Gotcha. We'll have the slides on Hova for people to go through.
Do you see my slides full screen now?
No.
1 minute. Oh, 1 sec. Thank you to the tech folks. And Shannon, we can see your screen, we can see you, we can hear you, and I think we should start. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. And if at any time you cannot see or hear me, please give me a signal somehow. Jaj, you can text me. I gave a keynote at a conference in Amsterdam a couple months ago and didn't realize that 5 minutes in my internet went out. So I gave the whole keynote and nobody was listening. So I had to start all over and do it again the next day. So let's hope that doesn't happen now. So first, I want to thank Andy and Jaj and the whole program committee and all the local host volunteers and especially the tech support staff. Yes, we did test all of this an hour ago and inevitably something will go wrong in that interim period, but thanks for figuring it out again for us. I'm assuming that most of you are familiar. As I prepared this talk, as you probably know, I had to give the title and abstract several months ago, not knowing what I would put together because it was still amidst the busy spring semester. But I've realized in preparing it that another title could be a parallel to The Cathedral and the Bazaar, a book that some of you might be familiar with, which is about software development, contrasting bottom-up and top-down modes of development. I think an alternative title for this could probably be either The Torrent or The Encyclopedia. I have been called both, and I think they both are meant to be complementary titles. So you can kind of choose which metaphor works for you. And this is all to say that I've included a lot of examples into this talk, which is kind of my style to begin with. And I hope really in this era of disappointment and disillusionment that seeing a myriad of examples will perhaps be a little overwhelming, but also will give us myriad points of possibility for exploring how things could be otherwise. As Jaj pointed out, was kind of a theme of one of the last classes I taught at the new school. So in what follows, we'll examine how our institutions officially deploy digital technologies in ways that often deny our humanity. And then we'll look at a bunch of extracurricular or extra academic projects in which technologies prioritize abolition, and that's in Wilson Gilmore's sense of life affirming, and also that prioritize solidarity. So, historians of technology and theorists of techne have long reminded us that our tools, whether clocks or guns or wheels or TikTok, always tell us a lot about our capacities and values, about what sets us apart from and binds us to those other entities with which we inhabit the planet, or whom we'll leave behind as we engineer the tools necessary to colonize new worlds. The technologies defining our tumultuous times have certainly revealed a great deal, including a lot we wish we probably didn't know about our government officials, about our corporate power brokers, including here you can see Elon Musk and Bill Ackman, who really, as you probably know, took to Twitter quite voraciously over the past few months to attack higher education. We also learned a lot about our fellow community members and family members, social media, radicalization. I don't want to, again, be a techno-determinist, but social media certainly played a factor in radicalizing a lot of family members that some of us might have lived with. And also we learned a lot about our university employers and students. I assume many, if not most of us here and you there, are affiliated with an institution of higher education. Over the past year, we've watched many universities egregiously mismanage political expression on our campuses, deploying a vast array of surveillance technologies, themselves a form of a species of digital technology, to silence and criminalize their own students and faculty. My own new employer, offered a particularly exemplary illustration. I wrote about it recently in the Keynote article for the surveillance-themed summer issue of the Architectural Review, a British design magazine. Specifically, I explored how university protests and surveillance and the history of the American campus as a defensible space, that is, a space designed to deter crime and unrest through, the use of natural and artificial surveillance, controlled access, and territoriality. On our campuses, I wrote, cameras and license plate readers monitor the motions of scholars, sports fans, Amazon vans, and ambulances. Expanding campus police forces direct pedestrian traffic and oust interlopers. Drones patrol athletic events and alumni weekends. ID cards and biometric scanners trace and regulate population flows. Countless software systems test for plagiarism and AI-generated flows or AI-generated material, track attendance and account for faculty productivity, monitor student engagement, check that students have clicked all the links and read the required reading, audit expenses, proctor exams, and monitor students' social media accounts with the ostensible goal of identifying mental health concerns and precluding self-harm or violence. As if that wasn't enough, most of those software vendors also find a way to monetize all that data, and in some cases, share it with local police and government agencies. Twice a year, Penn publishes the location of all of its outdoor CCTV cameras. As of late May, the most recent report, there were nearly 300 digital eyes trained on campus. While wealthy donors have long been troubled by changing campus demographics and social justice initiatives at Penn and other historically exclusive institutions, and really beyond all of higher education, the atrocious Hamas attacks of October 7th prompted vehement public alumni condemnations of and widespread government investigations into anti-Semitism across American campuses. Penn faced the first round of federal inquisition, which resulted, as you might know, in the forced resignation of its president. Since then, state and federal government officials, goaded by lots of lobbyists and emboldened by new hawkish regulations, have demanded that universities expand their surveillance of faculty and student activity and weaponize that data, often in many cases, against their own communities. Most institutions have proven all too willing to comply. Academic freedom be damned. Some administrators have implemented systems that invite university affiliates to surveil one another and report incidents of perceived bias and violations of open expression. In many cases, this isn't new on some campuses. The disciplinary actions for any infractions are then to be made public, likely through a portal or dashboard of some sort. And I wrote a bit about dashboard governance in cities and various federal governments and universities a few years ago. Just as an aside, I also want to note that NYU, as a punishment of the student protesters there, were asked to complete kind of integrity modules created by a company called Simplicity, an external software as a service vendor, which was itself not exactly a model of integrity. It was itself charged with criminal hacking. So just seeing the disparity between what the ideals valued or embodied in a lot of our software vendors and what they're ostensibly teaching our students and helping our faculty or our staff and faculty to develop. So the questions I want to ask are, how might our institution's adoption and application of these digital technologies shape the socio-technical context in which we learn about the humanities? And what do those socio-technical assemblages say about our institution's regard for our humanity and for the humanity of those outside the campus's walls and firewalls? The theme for this conference, as you know, has been reinvention and responsibility. The call for proposals invited you to examine how the new responsibilities many of us have taken on amidst the compounding crises of the past few years, from the pandemic to political factionalization to attacks on public institutions, to accelerating climate collapse, to epistemological rupture, all of those, and how those responsibilities might have created the possibility not only for conservation or repair, but for reinvention, which I guess is also a parallel to the theoretical meaning of abolition, wiping away to build new life-affirming possibilities. The organizers encourage you to consider inequities and accessibility, disaster recovery and sustainability, labor and pedagogy, a very ambitious, capacious, hopeful, and activist-aligned framing. I've tended to be a rather resourceful, hopeful, civically engaged person throughout my 20 years as a faculty member. I've designed and taught about 40 classes, none of which were explicitly digital humanities affiliated, in large part because we didn't have a DH program at the design school where I spent the first close to 20 years of my career. Although most of those classes were aligned with many of the core DH principles, including critical making, multimodal scholarship, collaborative knowledge production, and open access. I've built publicly accessible websites, and I've asked students to engage in some sort of critical making or public design project for nearly all of my classes since 2002. Here you see some of our work from last semester, a class I taught on local media in which we worked together to publish a field guide to Philadelphia local media, another class on collecting media. Yet I'll admit, and I raise this concern with Jaj and the conference organizers, I have never fully identified with digital humanities for all the reasons I mentioned before. We didn't really have a digital humanities home at my previous employer. And also because my first department, which was one of the first praxis-oriented media studies departments in the country, founded in a kind of a precursor version in the mid-60s, seemed to prefigure many of DH's principles since the program's generation in the late 1960s. I must also admit that the past few years have been pretty difficult for me, as I'm sure they have been for many of you. They've involved illness and loss and overwork and exhaustion and disappointment, and at the same time, hope that this pandemic would serve as a portal, as Arundhati Roy optimistically proposed back in April 2020. A portal to reinvention and responsibility, a break from the norms that allowed us to question fundamental presuppositions, to abolish old dysfunctional infrastructures and protocols and build anew. Personally, I was very hopeful that a new start in a new institution would constitute a portal from which I could build on my 20-year foundation and build new connections for the remainder of my career. It's been a little more complicated than that. So I worked with long-term partners to create a new portal that will allow for an escape from the insularity and conservatism that I sometimes found quite prevalent in a large university. And I've also wanted to build more integration with the commons of public knowledge institutions, a space of learning and sharing whose logics and ethics of operation are a lot more aligned with the subject matter of my teaching and research anyway. So as Jaj said, I have served on the board of the Metropolitan New York Library Council for about a decade, and I just started a new contract position with them as their first director of creative research and practice, which really connects all the libraries and archives across New York, several hundred of them, to arts and design organizations and more experimental projects. So this work across, as I said, a few hundred libraries and archives requires asking all the questions central to the conference, reinvention and responsibility, but with a bit more at stake, I'd say, considering they're serving about 9 million people, including the most vulnerable and disenfranchised, and across the entire technical stack, from interfaces and data down to the hardware and technical infrastructure. These organizations are responsible for building and maintaining the socio-technical assemblages for tumultuous times. I was pleased to see on the conference program, and I was able to attend quite a few of these virtually, various panels, talks, and posters that address software and infrastructure. What you see here is just a sample. But I do want to continue in this vein and think about the material conditions in which we do digital humanities and how that work both shapes our studies of the humanities and scaffolds our very humanity. We'll spend just a bit more time examining the digital conditions we've created within the academy and how those conditions structure our work and our subjectivity. And then we'll look at some historical precedents and contemporary collectives doing progressive media making and technical work. We'll consider how those communities have prefigured values and practices essential to the digital humanities, and how they might inspire us to reinvent and fortify stronger assemblages of solidarity in which technology is put in service of principles and politics. DH, as you know, has been actively engaged with building some of the software and infrastructures from Zotero to Manifold to Omeka, some of which were mentioned in the critical infrastructures panel earlier today. All of these support the epistemological and ethical principles essential to humanities' work. It's surprising to me how often many of our colleagues across our institutions choose tools and platforms that contradict the politics central to their work, writing about radical cooperatism, for example, in a journal published by Elsevier. What's more, the execution of our work depends upon other enterprise systems that we typically play no role in creating or choosing, and which still profoundly shape the environments in which the digital humanities and all learning gets done. Procurement might not seem sexy or intellectually stimulating, but it's political and ethical, and in its mundanity, or in some cases its overt evil, it shapes the field of epistemological and creative possibility. So take one prosaic example. There was a really great article in Business Insider of all places analyzing Workday as a structure, as a kind of a socio-technical assemblage that structures labor. How does Workday structure us as talent? And how does it structure the material conditions of labor as confusingly categorized reimbursable expenses? What does it mean to translate the affective labor of mentoring or advising, for instance, into a work this software will recognize? How many of us have spent minutes or phone calls trying to figure out exactly which of the categories in the drop-down menu to choose to update a receipt for a lunch reimbursement, for instance? Less exemplary of the banality of evil and more indicative of evil's monumentality are some of the explicitly carceral technologies that we discussed earlier. The protests have yielded several recent fantastic articles, including two you see here, many by graduate students and junior faculty, addressing how carceral technologies establish the cartography and ontology of the modern university. Think, too, about all the software as furniture we use, the platforms that constitute the naturalized infrastructure for our pedagogical experiences. Oops, I'm one slide behind here. Ben Williamson, Chris Gilliard, Jesse Strommel, Lindsay Weinberg, and Audrey Waters, whom you see on the left here, have written extensively about the ideologies engineered into EdTech, educational technology, and the way it digitally encodes our students and our own subjectivity and humanity. One of my former dissertation advisees and a current instructor at the University of Maryland, Jeffrey Morrow, published an eerily prescient blog post right before the 2020 lockdown in February of 2020. He writes about the cop shit that's prevalent and he is obligated to use in the classroom. And I'm just going to read this aloud. Cop shit is seductive. It makes metrics transparent. It allows for the clear progress toward learning objectives. Badges are cop shit, by the way. It also subsumes education within a market logic. Here, cop shit says, you will learn how to do this thing. We will know you learned it by the acquisition of this gold star. But in order for me to award you this gold star, I must parse you, sense you, track you, collect you, and here's the key. I will presume that you will attempt to flout me at every term. We are both scamming each other, you and I intend to win. When a classroom becomes adversarial, of course, as Kopshit presumes, then there must be a clear winner and loser. The student's education then becomes not a victory for their own self-improvement or enrichment, but rather that teacher conquered the student's presumed inherent laziness, shiftiness, etc., to instill some kernel of a lesson. Canvas is one example of maybe a mundane example of Kopshit. In all of its suspicious tracking, it exemplifies, I guess we could say, Kopshit light. Yet who knows what its recent acquisition by a global investment firm, which aims to datafy and monetize the entire stack of pre-K to adult education, will mean for its future operations and how it shapes our relationship to our students through this platform. And now I have a little aside here about artificial intelligence. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion over the past few years, any of you on social media, about what universities' policies are related to artificial intelligence. This from Joseph Hawley, who was very active in the student protests at Columbia, wondering about mostly administrations signing on to brand partnerships with particular technology. The University of Pennsylvania is one of those organizations. Wharton is very proud to be the first institution to have an official relationship with OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT. As you can see in the middle paragraph there, they'll begin providing ChatGPT enterprise licenses to all full-time and executive MBA students to further enable their exploration of generative AI. I'm sure we can all imagine the possibilities of kind of business and profit-minded people all being incentivized to begin thinking about how to monetize AI from the get-go in their education. And also from that piece, developing a fluency in AI and its impact on business decision-making is no longer an option, it's a requirement. We are once again answering society's call to address the needs of tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And I'll just say, considering some of the alumni of Wharton, I just wonder if we should be asking these folks to help to direct us. I'm just going to lay that there and allow you to answer that question on your own. If you read even things like teaching newsletters, the Chronicle of Higher Education is also given in to the inevitability of AI. So we can't neutralize it, we just have to lean in. We have to prepare our students for the inevitable influx and transformation of their work, the workforce, the work landscape that lies ahead of them, and the lives they will be leading. I was kind of similar mind last fall when I started teaching. This is a screenshot from my spring class, but I had a similar one in my fall syllabus, where regarding generative AI, my policy was like, it's essential to what we do in media studies as we use new technologies and think critically about their political, creative, ethical implications. And I invited my students to do that as long as they were transparent and reflexive about its use, which is, again, what we do in media studies. We use things, figure out what its affordances and limitations are, and then theorize about it. What I didn't really, why I was based on this, all this was based on the assumption or my familiarity with lots of interesting artists, poets, writers who have been using generative technologies for a very long time. There's a whole realm of generative film. Alison Parrish is a poet who uses generative technologies. My friends Tiga Brain and Sam Levine are kind of creative digital artists who use it in interesting ways. The book, The Artist and the Machine, is about all of these types of phenomenon and practices. But I kind of maybe overestimated my students' familiarity with this. They're familiar with the technology enough to be able to use it self-reflexively and critically. So this experiment over the past year failed. So I'm not sure I would do it the same way again. Also, as several of our fellow colleagues have pointed out, it is rank hypocrisy for universities to tell students that good citation practices matter or penalize them for plagiarism, more also allowing and facilitating technologies that are essentially plagiarism machines who are not scrupulous or doing due diligence at all in hoovering up all of the internet. Just this a couple days ago, 404 Media, which is a really great kind of worker cooperative tech publishing platform, talked about how NVIDIA is scraping a human lifetime a day of videos to train its AI. You probably have heard that many of the publishers we rely on to share our work that we need to publish in to get tenure have signed deals with AI companies. Not surprising to hear that Wiley and Taylor and Francis are among some of the first. They are among the most profitable companies. And then also just this past week, or just earlier this week, Oxford and Cambridge University Press talked about kind of opt-in offers they're creating with AI companies for their authors. It was interesting that just a few weeks ago, Penn announced that it signed a new open access publishing agreement with Wiley. I was a little disappointed to see that's who they chose, given kind of Wiley's not exactly exemplary history as an ethical publisher. and the fact that openness is often used as the ethical wash to justify these practices when there's been a good amount of scholarship over the past couple years about the commercialization and ethics washing of openness and how it's actually turned into a means to increase productivity and output, and it's actually led to or been a factor in the pushing out of many editorial collectives at various kind of long-standing, highly regarded journals. So you might have heard of the whole appropriate technology movement. I mean, these are questions I think we really need to ask about technology like AI. What are the appropriate uses? Appropriate technology really developed in the 60s as a way for development thinkers, development theorists to think about rather than just imposing Western technology onto the global South. Let's ask what are appropriate, fitting, welcome, ethical, consentful uses of these technologies. As you can see here on the left, some folks on Blue Sky are talking about what is AI actually good for? What are the real, quote unquote, real industrial uses? Where could it be used ethically in science? And then where should it maybe not be used? So asking these questions about appropriateness, which are kind of nuanced, humanistically informed questions to be asking. We also have to ask questions about the larger global, maybe like way beyond our generation's impact of artificial intelligence, its use of water, energy, its production of e-waste. All of these in our kind of generating an AI-based assignment, we're thinking about the long tail, the radiating implications of using the heavy infrastructure behind these technologies for our class assignments. Questions even amongst the workers of a lot of these companies about a reckless race for dominance and rather careless practices happening inside these companies in rushing their products to market. There are economic questions too. An article, a recent piece in Bloomberg quoting some research by, I think, McKinsey and Goldman Sachs, arguing that given the amount of infrastructure we are investing to build the back end, all of the server farms and cooling facilities, et cetera, to power generative AI, that's about $1 trillion of investment. What $1 trillion problem will it solve? And people haven't really found a compelling kind of case study or use case yet. And that's not to say that we should, just because we have the infrastructures and we have to manufacture an application. That's one of my big frustrations with most Silicon Valley thinking. We have the tool, now let's retroactively justify its existence. Instead, maybe the tool shouldn't exist. Another just yesterday or 2 days ago, another piece about the economic illogic of justifying AI's existence. So there's new research coming out really questioning whether or not there are sufficient use cases to justify purely economically the universal application of these technologies. So this, in addition to the environmental impacts, in addition to the ethical and kind of pedagogical implications, are all questions we should be asking that, again, go across the stack from the interfacing of it, interfacing with generative AI, all the way down to the hardware and pipes and cables and architectures that are necessary for its operation. And of course, as you know, AI has generated questions about our pedagogical tools for helping students engage with digital technologies. As Linda Nagari described on Wednesday in her keynote, all of this upheaval on the hardware software levels of the technical stack has huge implications for what we encounter through the interface, how data are shaped and shared and shadow banned and hoovered up and deep faked and internalized and activated in people's everyday lives. I think we're all familiar with the pedagogical implications here. There's concern over the insufficiency of traditional media literacy and critical information literacy frameworks, which don't seem to hold up now that we're dealing at a time when evidence, fact, truth, and credibility have been desemanticized, weaponized, and undermined. Scholars from the Data and Society Research Institute, which some of you might be familiar with, recently published just within the past couple weeks, some revisitations of some of their canonical, or I would say germinal, media literacy and disinformation white papers from 2016. They published them right at the start of the Trump era, and now realizing there's a lot that just doesn't work with what we thought would happen, or what we thought we were hopeful would happen 8 years ago. Among those discoveries is how the academy's intersection with party politics makes it more dangerous and difficult to even study using DH methods, things like disinformation and all these epistemological crises. Many university-based disinformation centers, critical pedagogy centers, have been targeted by Jim Jordan's committee and shut down in many cases, or been dramatically diminished in their capacity. So this is what we're up against. Can we take on the responsibility to reinvent socio-technical assemblages, media ecologies that reassert our humanity? So what is our responsibility to help our students, our colleagues, our institutions, our communities writ large review, resist, reimagine, and reinvent the media ecologies in which we live and work and which shape our humanity? How can recognizing digital tools and platforms as socio-technical assemblages and thinking across the technical stack, everywhere from how we engage with them, from the interface to code to software, hardware, and the heavier infrastructure, allow for a more holistic perspective and offer multiple, perhaps simultaneous points of intervention? So all that preface up front, that was a big downer of an introduction, I realized, but I'm afraid I just had to get that out because it has really been weighing me down this year. But I also don't want to come across as a Luddite. At the same time, just arguing that we should do away or not consider, or throwing the baby out with the bathwater, pick your metaphor here. At the same time, we also have to reconsider, as Bryant Merchant argues in his recent book, what the Luddites are. It's often regarded as kind of an anti-tech pejorative, but really what the Luddites are, the history of the Luddites, the real ones, not the pejorative figment of the entrepreneurial imagination, gives us a framework to evaluate the utility of technologies and their social impacts. So considering who benefits from the use of new technology and who is perhaps unwittingly or without their consent being deleteriously impacted. These are the questions we should ask about all technologies we use in our work. Something I've tried to do across the classroom. I'm just giving a little sample here of some of the classes I've taught where I've tried to ask these questions. I taught during the immediate lockdown. I switched to offer a class over the forget when it was, early 2020 or 2020, excuse me, a digital ethnography intensive where we had a compressed class combining 3 different institutions to think about how we could reframe ethnography to work across kind of digital systems. I've also co-taught with a friend of mine, Greta Byram, who's a community technology expert, a class called Anthropology of Networks, where we look at kind of how the hardware and the actual networking, the getting the internet access itself or cell phone access is integral to especially marginalized and disenfranchised community. I taught another class with a philosopher colleague, Zed Adams, called Thinking Through Interfaces, where we thought about interfaces capaciously, from text interfaces, the history of the typewriter. We read the book, Tom Mulaney's work about the Chinese typewriter, to sonic interfaces and haptic interfaces. And I also do a lot of work about urban technology. So we did a class about urban intelligence, where we looked about what are the pros and cons of incorporating technologies into and digitizing and automating a lot of urban services and systems. One kind of very DHE class I did teach before I even knew that DH existed started in formulation around 2007. I taught it from 2009 to 13. And this was urban media archaeology, where we mapped urban historical media infrastructures, and we worked with designers and computer scientists to actually build our own OpenStack mapping platform, very humanities-oriented platform to address things like ambiguity, erasure, uncertainty, all that kind of stuff that are central to the way humanists kind of recognize the nuance of our work. But because the New School did not really have a digital preservation section, not much digital infrastructure to speak of, this platform doesn't even exist anymore. It just wasn't preserved. Fortunately, I grabbed some screenshots before it went away. I'm going to skip over this in the interest of time. Another class I've taught that's very much related to some of the questions I post here is one that really acknowledges the ubiquitous integration of data into our landscapes, whether that is our grocery store, walking down the street, factory farms, container ports, all types of things. So that was a mouthful of a title: Data, Artifacts, Infrastructures, and Landscapes. And I'm highlighting these 2 lessons here in the middle and the right panel to show that I always try to incorporate some lessons into these classes about how to resist, how to ask those questions about who benefits and who does not, what are the unintended or intended costs in some cases, and then what are some strategies we can use to resist, whether It's the type's probably too tiny for you to read on the right, but Finn Brunton and Helen Nussenbaum's work about obfuscation, a lot of kind of creative artists work with like QR codes or kind of computer vision camouflage to render yourself invisible or indistinguishable to a CCTV camera or to facial recognition, for instance. So from the I guess you could say like mild and good-natured all the way down to the kind of borderline illegal approaches to resisting optimization and data capture. And then I created an Arena channel. I like to use this platform called Arena, which is a very visually oriented collection management system to collect a whole bunch of different artist examples of critical artists and designers who are and scholars in different fields who have offered approaches to resisting smartness. And I also have drawn a lot of attention to, or a lot of my work in this area is really informed by that longer history I've had in my old department. I mentioned that my original home was in the Department of Media Studies at the New School, which started as the Center for Understanding Media in the mid-1960s. And I shared an office with a man named Paul Ryan, who was a member of the Rain Dance Foundation, which was an early video art collective. And right down this hallway was Deirdre Boyle, who was a really highly regarded historian of guerrilla television and video art. So learning a lot about them, about kind of an historical medium that was kind of historical to me, but very prevalent or prescient and new to them, and what kind of lessons it had to offer to us about how we're using quote unquote new technologies today. The Rain Dance Foundation that I mentioned, Paul and Rain Dance also published a really, again, prescient series of journals, of small magazines, little magazines, like we could call them zines, maybe, called Radical Software. They're all digitized and available online if you want to look at them. But there you can see they're trying to think about responsible, appropriate ways of using technology, often towards kind of promoting social activism. I'm going to skip over this in the interest of time. Again, because we started a bit early, I didn't have my chance the last 10 minutes to go out and prune some more out of this. But I just wanted to highlight some of the scholarship, including this from Peter Sachs-Colopy, who has done really great work, wrote a fantastic dissertation on the history of video art and people using in the 1960s these new video recorders, newly portable, and how they can be used for all of these unintended applications in artistic expression and political revolution. He also highlights a group called the Video Freaks, which I want to highlight here to you, which is also really, I'm seeing I have a text here. I want to make sure I have, okay. So Judge is just telling me we're on time. I wanted to make sure the sound didn't go out or something. So I'm going to skip over this video clip, because I wasn't able to share my sound with you. But the Video Freaks are an organization, a radical video collective that used a lot of their video production to highlight pressing social issues of the day. They interviewed the Black Panthers. They looked at kind of various social justice movements, talked about abortion. So really using the portability and the accessibility, the democratization of these technologies to put them in the hands of people who are not professionally trained to tell stories that wouldn't otherwise be told. This slide is just highlighting, it's a little kind of a footnote, I guess you could say, highlighting some other scholarship that looks at other art collectives and other approaches to anarchist filmmaking and activist kind of digital production of various forms. And all of these groups, again, one of the things that makes them so effective and why I'm highlighting them here is that they really think across the technical stack. Everything from how do we aestheticize our video productions, what are the subjects we choose, how do we access interviewees, and then how do we build a social and a technical infrastructure to do our production. So Video Freaks, actually, they're originally funded by CBS, then lost CBS funding, and then we're kind of like, I have to do a bit more research to understand how they supported themselves after that. But they started a farm. They kind of moved onto a farm in upstate New York and developed a lot of public education programs, training local people in the community, a lot of kids about how to do video production, how to like highlight stories that wouldn't otherwise be told. And they wanted to make sure people knew how their technology worked. So one of the things they produced was this really fantastic manual called the Spaghetti City Video Manual. It's all about a guide to the use, repair, and maintenance of video cameras. So it's illustrated, the choice of aesthetics is a way to make it accessible and approachable to multiple kind of demographics. So the manual is also something I've thought about a lot, as well as if we want to think about how to empower people to use technologies in an informed way, there's a long history of thinking about the manual or collectives that are using technologies in aberrant or activist ways. Fred Turner talks a bit about the whole history, sometimes even the neoliberal history of the collectives of California in the 1960s and 70s, many of which also were using kind of radical uses of technology. One of the outputs of those groups was Stuart Brand and the Whole Earth Catalog, which some of you might be familiar with. The Whole Earth Catalog has recently been digitized, and all of its kind of offshoots have also been shared in the Whole Earth Index online, if you want to look into that more. And it's also inspired some people to rethink the Whole Earth Catalog from different kind of subjective perspectives. So we have the New Woman Survival Catalog that was published. That was a kind of a feminist revision of the Whole Earth Catalog. And more recently, if you don't know Mindy Su's Cyberfeminism Index, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's a fantastic book, and also there's a digital version of it as well. It's a pretty encyclopedic kind of a cataloging of cyberfeminist projects, looking deep into the history and precursors to the official term itself. But these are all inspired by an attempt to revise from different, more inclusive subject positions, the manual culture of the Whole Earth movement. Manuals were also an integral part to a class I taught called Tools. In 2019, it was an undergraduate studio seminar I co-taught with a friend named Orzu Balski, whose practice really embodies, again, this questions about responsible technology all across the stack. With the students' project in that class was to develop a critical manual to take a tool, whether some students chose beasts of burden, one student chose the tampon, another student chose the Leatherman, somebody else chose, I had a few people choosing kind of digital technologies, and they had to rewrite the manual for it, proposing alternative, perhaps more responsible, more ethical uses, or to discourage use if they regarded the tool as having deleterious impacts. So that was a fun student project to kind of play with the rules, to think about the rules of this format and then push against them, to think about how we should reimagine our use of naturalized tools. All of this work then led to me thinking about manuals over the years, to a piece I published just a couple of months ago about the cultural history of the repair manual. And then how far we can stretch that model of a manual. Can we think about a manual to climate change, a manual to abolition, a manual to liberation? So what are the limitations of the manual, and how can it be actually useful as a conversation starter or a pedagogical tool in different contexts? So the manual, thinking about these print forms, is my transition into the next section, which is about zines. And I know that zines have been kind of increased in popularity in the digital humanities community as a pedagogical tool, as a way to kind of practice critical making, as a way to externalize a lot of the hands-on knowledge of the hardware and critical making knowledge that happens in a lot of DH classes and labs. I'm highlighting here, we can see the Barnard Zine Library, the Barnard Digital Humanities Center, I'm sure makes heavy use of the Barnard Zines Library. Also, there was a digital humanities project produced by Jenna Friedman and Lauren. Jenna Friedman is the zine librarian at Barnard, worked with Lauren Cahoe on a digital humanities project at CUNY to create the Zine Union Catalog, which is another beautiful application of kind of blending the analog and the digital, using all the sensibilities of digital humanities. Jaj, also one of the organizers of this conference, has used a lot of zines in her work. Led a session called What is a Zine to introduce people to the format, its applications, a bit of its history. And then Jaj, I also saw that you talked about some of your work with zines at the Arcade Sustainability Symposium earlier this semester, which is really great to see. Jaj did a really fantastic curriculum on AI literacy and then translated all of the knowledge that was generated there into zine format. The Scholars Lab is another place where zines are very prevalent. A really great blog post here about zine making as critical DH pedagogy. Amanda Visconti, who I think is either there physically or virtually, has shared some great stuff on Blue Sky over the past couple weeks about cataloging a lot of the zines they have in their collection and then creating a zine bakery page to share a lot of that material. And as I'm sure you know, if we think there's a lot of study within political science, media studies, literary studies, looking at the zine as a political medium, a medium form that was chosen explicitly because its creators were aware, had a full stack, again, literacy, understanding of the political and ethical roles that it did. So zines are not only about the aestheticized, cut and paste, cosmetic kind of visual treatment. It's also about the making. It's about the materials. It's about, in some cases, illegally appropriating, undercommenting, stealing materials from your workplace, using Kinkos as an important part of the infrastructure, and intentionally circumventing, some cases by necessity, the official commercial publishing kind of industry enterprise. So again, zines in their simplicity and seeming kind of mundane modesty embody a lot of full stack kind of critical media literacy about why they exist as a medium and how they do what they do. There's also been some work within architecture recently. Zines, there was a flurry of zine publications in the 1960s and 70s within architecture and urbanism that was collected in a really great exhibition at the Storefront for Art and Architecture that I wrote about, and that then was collated into a fantastic, beautiful catalog called Clip Stamp Fold. And one of my first ever peer-reviewed publications was a review of why, in this age of proliferating blogs, architects were returning to zine making in the mid 2000s, early 2010s or so. And in many cases, it was a desire to kind of get back to a physical making, which is, you would assume, a part of architecture, building physical stuff. But in an age of austerity, particularly after 2008, there wasn't a whole lot of building to be done. So instead, you could translate your critical discourse into the making of a physical, as a printed object, as an architecture in and of itself. I also just want to highlight the fact that there are other non-Western contexts we should be looking at too. There was a really great exhibit at Printed Matter in New York a couple weeks ago about publishing and resistance in South Asia. So just acknowledging that there are other, again, global histories that we should be drawing on here. A lot of these projects, interestingly, involve textiles. So actually incorporating embroidery, stitchery, textiles into the production of a printed object, which is a really fantastic alternative genealogy to consider. And this is a case study, another deeper case study I want to look at, a project that is exemplary of, again, a full stack analysis of why they do things the way they do. Some of you might have heard before of the Detroit Printing Co-op, which was produced by led by Freddie and Lorraine Perlman. He was an economist, she was a violinist, an interesting pairing. But before they were the Detroit Printing Co-op, they were part of a group called the Red and Black Gang in Kalamazoo. And in 1969, I was originally drawn for them because some of their critical university publications really resonated for me at the time, and they still do. So Perlman was fired from his job teaching economics at, I think it might have been Wayne State, or I forget exactly what university. So he published a brilliant little pamphlet called "I Accuse This Liberal University of Terror and Violence." And this cover has gotten a lot of mileage in my life over the years. Also, a really satirical guide for initiation rites for professors and administrators about what to deal with student questions, students questioning the orthodoxy, how to deal with revolutionary action. A pamphlet like this, published in 1969, could have been very useful to, and seemed to be followed in textbook fashion in the way some administrations dealt with unrest on their campuses just this past year. So the publishing co-op published magazines for Black and Red, for Radical America. They published work by Grace Lee Boggs and C.L.R. James. They also published an unauthorized translation of Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle. And they were really kind of a communist co-op. This is a quote from AIGA, which is the Graphic Artists Association Ion Design publication. They considered the equipment to be social property, not owned or controlled by any person or group. The purpose of the co-op was to be a site where participants could engage in printing without facing the threat of censorship, which at the time was a real problem for activists on the left, and they could labor free from exploitation. So this is a spread showing the Society of the Spectacle publication they did. Again, as I said, they were really very much aware of how aesthetics, choice of subject matter, choice of even the materials they printed with, and the machinery itself, and the fact that they intentionally created a shop that was outside the commercial publishing enterprise was an intentional choice. And these are the rules that they posted in the shop. And I'm just going to highlight this little passage at the bottom. People who benefit from the printing co-op by preventing its continued existence or by exploiting the labor of others will be excluded by all the users of the printing co-op who are interested in its continued existence and who will not allow their labor to be exploited. This is a lesson to be learned, I think, by a lot of academics, bears repeating. But again, it's an awareness of the labor politics, too, of the material conditions in which their media were being produced, which is a consciousness that could be much more useful in our use of digital technology. The co-op model is very useful and it has been implemented across various digital projects as well. There's a platform cooperativism consortium, which is based at the New School, or at least started at the New School, thinking about how to use cooperative models and digital technologies to empower gig workers and formal economies across the world, especially in the Global South. There are people like Carolyn Woolard, who is behind and partners behind the Art Co-op, thinking about artists forming cooperative solidarity economies. Nathan Schneider recently published a book, which is available open access, called Governable Spaces, about kind of cooperative governance models for building alternative digital spaces that embody a politics that are maybe a bit more palatable than what we find on, say, Twitter today. There's another organization, New Public, which is about reimagining social media and thinking about governance, cooperative structures of content management, for instance. All of this is especially prescient because, as you might have known in the news, Elon Musk sued the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, an organization of advertisers who wanted to make sure their advertisements did not appear next to salacious content or violent imagery. And Elon Musk then sued them for boycotting X. And as a consequence, because that alliance did not have the funding to support them to defend themselves against X, they essentially disbanded. So this was a case of warfare, showing us what's at stake when cooperatives are up against kind of the behemoth of the corporate social media that is represented by Elon Musk. Which is why, again, we really have to think about building new infrastructures that embody more responsible, consentful, ethical values. Ethan Zuckerman is one of those people who talks about public interest technology and building, as you see here, building a more honest, whatever that means to him, a more honest internet. Again, I packed in more here than I had time to take out before we started, but just other examples of applications of government service design. Some of my former students work at an organization at the federal government called 18F, which is applying a lot of these sensibilities to developing government technologies to make government more accessible and less frustrating and more usable, more useful to people, again, especially the most disenfranchised. Going back to zines here to kind of round out this section, and leading us into the next one is there was a zine fair in New York hosted at the School for Poetic Computation back in 2018, where a lot of my former students kind of shared their work. Arati and Philip there at the top of the list were both former students of mine. Again, showing this burgeoning merger of sensibilities between the zine as a media format and a lot of the sensibilities incorporated into digital humanities. One of the folks who's really a leader in the School for Poetic Computation's use of zines is Netta Bomani, who did a whole master's thesis about the zine and teaches a class at the School for Poetic Computation about reading, writing, and compiling zines. This was from last fall, as you can see on the right. And I organized an event with the Metropolitan New York Library Council back in 2019 about the role of artists as pedagogical forces in public libraries. And Netta and the SFPC folks and the Cybernetics Library partnered to have a live zine making workshop in the middle of the space where they were doing essentially live note-taking about what was happening in the conference and building zines in real time. So it was just nice to see the kind of the continuity of these zine and DH kind of mergers and how both, again, are thinking about the whole stack of responsibility that are inherent in what they're doing. SFPC, as I mentioned, that's where a lot of the zine class was happening. That is also a cooperative that embodies, again, a very thoughtful consideration of all of its infrastructure building. It just recently announced that they become a nonprofit with shared leadership. Before, it had been more kind of an informal cooperative model. So these, again, are kind of questions that are inherent to any cooperative project about the longevity, sustainability, how long can we rely on gift economies and affective labor before we have to formalize it and get people paid for these types of things. I was lucky to be able to teach a class with SFPC in 2018, where we looked at kind of the politics and ethics of classification, and how they are both in analog formats and in the kind of the classification of algorithms. So here's just some illustrations of some of the analog critical making types of activities we did. Some examples of some of the other types of classes they do, again, looking at everything from code and aesthetics all the way down to software and hardware. Things about drawing data by hand, the body as a biomonitor, think about the politics of kind of self-tracking. Camila Janan Rashid is an artist I really love, has taught classes about writing. Might be interesting to the literature professors in the audience or in the DH community. A lot of Camila's work through her art practice and her classes at SFPC, I'm sure would be of interest to you if you don't know them already. Another approach to this is, again, more kind of on the hardware creative hacking approach, which could and should maybe be more a part of digital humanities. Sam Levine has taught a class where it's looking at the whole corpora of video and thinking about how we can do critical scraptivism, kind of scraping video content and turning it into making kind of political advocacy campaigns. One of his most recent own projects was called the NYPD Koppelganger, which scrapes various government databases, New York City government databases, and allows you to input a photograph of yourself and find through machine vision which New York City Police Department employee you most resemble. And then you can see their entire history of arrests, of reports made against them, of the amount they've cost the New York Police Department in terms of kind of legal fees and settlements, etc. So it's kind of a fun and aberrant and perhaps slightly on the borderline of illegal way of using scraping technologies to produce kind of some type of activist for activist purposes. I'm going to skip over some of these. And I think another area that they talk about, thinking about across the technical stack, is actually not just about coding, but also building infrastructures. So there's a class at SFPC called Solidarity Infrastructures. So how do we build networks that connect people? How do we build mesh networks, et cetera, that actually embody a politics of collaboration and solidarity rather than extracting data or something that is kind of very driven by commercial logics? So this is, again, thinking across the stack. If we're going to do poetic computation, that poetry should exist all the way from the interface down to the building of the hardware. Just a couple other examples that I'm going to, again, skip over. These are some of the types of things we talked about. One of the lessons of my local media class, we looked at a Philadelphia-based instantiation of some of these sensibilities. There's an organization called Iffy Books, which, as you can see here, is a solar punk hackerspace info shop and bookshop, mostly focusing on kind of environmental and critical technology books. They host a variety of programs that really, again, embody this whole technical stack sensibility, including a series of events on permacomputing, where people can take the lessons of permaculture, existing in good relation with the earth, and applying them to the way we build technology, everything from chips to kind of one-bit computers to networks. They also, as you can see here, partner with the Philly Community Wireless to implement those ideas at a larger scale across entire communities and neighborhoods of the city. So all of this work reminds us that code, interfaces, software, hardware, and infrastructures can be designed to embody modes of operation and engagement that prioritize equity, inclusion, exploration, experimentation, and consent above efficiency, surveillance, extraction, and monetization. This work is digital humanities, meets environmental humanities, meets electrical engineering, meets anthropology, meets book history, meets community organizing, meets a bunch of other disciplines. So there's a lot of different sensibilities that can be taught and experienced through these types of projects. So as we close, I just want to return to the zine libraries we visited earlier. So this is the zine library at Iffy Books at its previous kind of location. It has since moved actually closer to where I live in Philadelphia now. So you can see some of the headings. They have zine collections about the commons, about DIY tech skills, about security and privacy, about Ubuntu, about building a solar-powered array, etc. So the library itself has been something that I have thought about as a great place to do this cross-stack critical thinking about technologies as socio-technical assemblages. And this is just a kind of an assembly of some of my writing about libraries over the years. My first book was about the design of public libraries. I've written about kind of little artistic experimental libraries, wrote a piece about fugitive libraries, have organized exhibitions about digital privacy and collaboration with libraries, distributed exhibitions. And that's why I'm really excited about this next chapter of kind of a secondary job I have with the Metropolitan New York Library Council, where they wear multiple hats across the stack. They are the hub for digital culture, kind of what was once the Digital Public Library of America hub for Metropolitan New York. They kind of serve as a common collection across all of the New York's cultural institutions to find a central portal to accessing all of New York's digital cultural heritage. They also have software development. They have a unit called Archipelago, which is building an OpenStack collection management system for myriad institutions across the country, really. It's not just New York-based institutions they work with. We worked with all the city library systems and with the mayor's office to develop a digital safety pedagogical public pedagogy program. There's also Colin Rhinesmith runs the Digital Equity Research Center, which is all about working with communities in the New York metro area and around the country, really, to think about building community networks and advocating access to the internet. And one of the projects they are partnering with is Digital Navigators, having people in the community work with the folks who are marginalized or senior citizens or the disabled to make sure they have the access they need and at prices they can afford. So this is, again, across the stack, everything from building software and hardware and content and metadata and programming and shared education. This is kind of the commons embodied, which is why it's so exciting to me. And among the projects I'm going to be working on with them are a new project called the Library Field, which is thinking about what a library can be if it's literally in a field, which gives you, I wouldn't want to call it a blank slate because that sounds kind of colonialist and extractivist, but if you're starting with a field, what new fields of expertise and operation and practice can you build to bear on reinventing a library from the ground up that is outside, that is a space of commoning? And it really builds on a lot of work that I thought about in my Redesigning the Academy class, where we thought how the academy could be otherwise. How could a library field be a space for digital humanities, full stack, responsible technology consideration if we have a field of common gathering that we can kind of ask these questions together? So these institutions and organizations are socio-technical assemblages, dispositifs, to kind of quote Foucault, that have the potential to embody conviviality and promote community and autonomy. What might we learn from them about imagining and instilling solidarity networks in which technology is put in service of principle and politics, rather than seen, as some of the previous examples kind of exemplify, just a necessary evil or something that is happening, it's inevitable wave, and we're just going to have to teach our students to deal with it? What instead, if we had more agency and realized we can build them rather than just accepting them off the shelf or in the box? So that was my deluge, and I hope that there were some points of entry that you could maybe connect to. And I'd love, for whatever time we have left, to see what questions or comments or recommendations you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. I did not expect to be on your slides that much. Thank you. We're going to give Shannon a couple of minutes to breathe and maybe have some water. Folks who are in this room and have some questions, there are mics placed on the sides of the room. And people who are online attending this keynote, please add your questions to Whova Q&A or chat. We are asking you to prefer Whova because we can keep those questions, and Shannon can maybe asynchronously answer them if she's able. But otherwise, that's Whova, and then Zoom chat is also open for questions. And we'll try our best to get to them. We have a bit of a close at 5:55, so we'll see. All right, come on through. Yeah, we'll.
Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess my question is, I don't think there's a single person in this room who disagrees with you about the need for responsible technology of the future in creative uses of it. But my question is, what can we do? Because as far as I know, none of us are in charge of a huge technological corporation. And I guess I feel like this talk should be given to them directly, I guess, into their brains. And that's my main reaction to this is sort of, what do? Do we just resist against it? Or can we also build something?
I would really love for other people in the room to see what they have to say as well. If anybody wants to add comments to the chat, because I don't have the definitive answer here. I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, as you can see, I used Google Slides to share this with you today. That is not a benevolent institution either. I mean, there are some types of choices, compromises you have to make rather than expecting like purity politics. So I think it's probably a multi-pronged approach here. I had to use Zoom during the pandemic, but I always started off my classes on Zoom by having a little lesson about surveillance culture, Zoom's corporate background, its financing, how it's collecting and monetizing their data. So helping students to be aware of like what's happening if we are stuck using particular technologies, and then maybe thinking about alternatives as well. So there are some kind of like OpenStack, more ethically designed alternatives to some of these things that aren't extractivist. The challenge in some of those cases, they're not always as user-friendly. Some of them aren't as accessible in multiple senses of the term. So this can be like a lesson that we sometimes incorporate into classes where we just actually have a little trial to see what other alternatives are out there. Acknowledge that perhaps they might not be appropriate for us to use for the long term because of the frictions they produce for our two hours together, but just to think about just making them aware of the broader landscape is, first of all, what's at stake, the broader landscape of alternatives that are out there. And then I think like what you do in the classroom is not just ending in those 15 weeks. As I mentioned, I've had quite a few students who have gone on to like the public policy lab, who work at 18F, who are building public interest technologies. Like they're in the long term actually building alternatives to some of these enterprise software systems. So that's like the long-term pedagogical tale here that I think is like part of what we ultimately would like to have happen in our classroom. But I realize that yeah, if your vice president of IT is dictating certain policies, I know some people have to use Canvas. There are certain kind of obligations to use certain technologies. I think, and I don't know how applicable these are across the board, but in cases where I have been compelled to use things, I make that compulsion a lesson as part of the class, and maybe try to find ways to use minimal computing, use that platform as little as possible, and push things out to be more ethical external platforms. So there are a lot of different strategies. There was a lot of talk about this at the start of the pandemic. A lot of wikis and Google Docs developed of people proposing alternatives to Zoom and Canvas, etc. So there's some good discourse and resources out there about this. It's all a question of what is the permissible resistance, and to what degree do your institutions permit resistance? And I realize that all depends on many things, like the culture of an institution, the militarization of state kind of legislatures certainly dictate certain things. But again, I hope that by showing the bunch of these different examples, mentioned could be anywhere from the interface all the way down to the hardware, that might give you multiple places where you could potentially intervene and kind of promote more forms of critical literacy. That was a very long and rambling answer, but I tried to get a whole bunch of different possible responses in there, given the fact that everybody's coming from different institutional positions that allow for different degrees of flexibility. And I would love it if anybody else has responses to that question, if you want to add them to one of the chat forums.
I think we can also go to the next question. Please introduce yourself before asking your question.
Hi there, my name is Melissa Terrace. I'm from the University of Edinburgh, and I'm one of the people behind Transcribus, which is the AI platform for handwritten recognition technology. So I'm going to use Transcribus to answer your question, which is how do we build technology that's slightly different and is governed slightly differently. So Transcribus is the only company that we have found in the world that is in AI that has been set up as a cooperative. And it has used the European Cooperative Society, which is the mechanism by which farmers look after pasteurization, and they all like club around a facility to pay for how you like make your milk safe and contribute to that. We use that farming legislation to set up the AI company after the end of 10 years of EU funding. When the funding it ran out, we had to turn it into a company and we set it up as a cooperative. There's many people here in the audience who are members of the cooperative. There's many institutions around the world who are members of the cooperative. There's 250 members now who pay every year about $1,000 towards the cooperative to keep this AI mechanism of turning images of old documents into transcribed text alive, right? And we also do other things like sell big contracts, and we have to buy tokens to use it and things like that. We turn over about 2 million euros a year. We employ 32 people, and we are co-owned by 250 different organizations. It's really hard to get to that stage, though. We had 10 million euros of EU funding before we spun out. And I've come to the conclusion that the people we should be putting pressure on are the funders to mandate that if they want things to spin out, we have to look at cooperative models. If they funded taxpayers' money for universities to develop technology, we have to look at these alternative models for community co-ownership. Otherwise, universities that want us to spin out, to make companies, they're wanting us to join the capitalist race, which is spin out of it, within 2 years, exit and sell to Google or Microsoft or Apple. That is the race which at the moment exists. And we as a community have to fight against that, and have to fight against the extractive capitalism which wants us to develop tech that we can sell immediately. I'm in a lot of innovation spaces just now, and the fight with the innovation people is they want to teach people how to innovate and sell their company within 2 years. That is selling, getting your company bought over by Google or Apple or Microsoft. But we in this community are all about keeping technology alive for the long term. And to do that, we have to investigate cooperative models. We have to understand the power of community and keeping things alive and in doing that. So I'm about to publish a paper that says all of this. It's 20,000 words long, and it really is like burn the whole fucking thing down, because actually we need to set up cooperatives that challenge extractive capitalism, and we can do that as a community and doing something different. So there's your answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. We have a question from Zoom. Tanisha Gwen says, thank you so much for sharing your work. The role that digital spaces play as infrastructures of injustice in the global south in identity-centered politics keeps falling back on polarizing binaries that are useful but never sufficient. What are your thoughts on that?
I have to read that question here.
Yes, okay.
All the time. I apologize, first of all, if I kind of reified some of those binaries. But I think that post-colonial theory, obviously, and decolonizing, there's so much scholarship recently that also applied to the technical sphere, kind of decolonizing technology, post-colonial technical networks, et cetera, helps us to think through the past or beyond the binary model. So that's not my area of expertise. It's something I'm aware of, but I would really kind of encourage us to engage more, myself included, to engage more with a lot of that work, to think about how to think beyond the binary. beyond these binary models, and also to realize that these seeming dichotomies of haves and have-nots also play out not solely in the global North and global South context, but within our own within individual microcosms at every point of the world. Even, for example, New York or Philadelphia, where I am now, a huge portion of the population does not have access to high-speed wireless at home. Or did not have access to Wi-Fi when it was obligatory during the pandemic. So recognizing that some of these gradients of access, gradients of harm exist on multiple scales, not only global South and global North, which, as you said, is a reductive and unhelpful binary, but also on more microcosmic and regional levels as well. So I just say engage more with a scholarship that is more eloquently than I can actually addressing these issues of but then also figure out how it applies across different scales of technical access across the stack. Again, it's just like the model that I've been thinking throughout this whole talk.
Okay, Caitlin 10 has a question, which is also a comment. I'm not too sure if I should read it all out.
We can alternate.
Do you want to? Okay.
Sure. Professor Mattern, from your talk, I realized that when we discuss the digital, we're really talking about environments, how digital is physical as structure and point of interaction. Much of the language we use around technology, particularly with AI and large language models, tends to obscure or distort the violent materiality of these technologies. For instance, the cloud isn't in the ephemeral storage in the sky. It's servers in the ocean heating up the sea. Technology is not just a tool, but a cultural force that mediates, influences, and reshapes human experiences. DH often tends to rely heavily on digital methodologies, where interpretive work is often delegated to the computer, leading to conclusions like the computer said X, so that's what it is, without deeper interpretation of meaning, errors, or missing information. This can sometimes overlook how the outputs themselves reveal more about the culture, text, or artifact in question. Given these complexities, how do you envision, there's more.
Yes. Sorry, Caitlin. How do you envision DH evolving to critically address these environmental and material realities and move beyond this reliance on digital methodologies? Specifically, how can we incorporate more analytic and hermeneutic approaches along with the tactile and haptic entry points like zine making to better engage with the profound physical and cultural implications of digital technologies? Take your time, Shannon.
Okay, that is a big question, and I think that also this is where I feel like I've been very fortunate to have been working across media studies and having some exposure to digital humanities, because I think that they're not always overlapping, but very productively complementary modes of thinking about digital technologies. Media studies sometimes does kind of the textual analysis, the interpretive work. Actually, quite a bit of it does, but there's also increasingly, if you go to our big conference, the Society for Cinema and Media Studies, it used to be mostly interpretive work, but over the past 15 years or so, there's a lot more looking at things like hardware. Infrastructure studies has exploded. Logistics, critical logistics studies has gotten really big in the past few years. So people really moving down the technical stack to the harder, more environmental stuff. Meeting the environment, environmental media has also kind of exploded in interest in recent years. So I feel like there's a possible, much more possibility for complementarity and partnership between those fields. And I realized there are other models. I mean, one of my dissertation students kind of critiqued the stack. I wanted to look instead at the mesh as a topology to think about connecting things, about how networks work, about how digital technologies work. But if we do, I think the stack is a helpful pedagogical framework, because if we think about the interpretive stuff happening at the code end of the stack, we also want to think about how the software has been designed that really produce those interpretive frameworks in there that you're critiquing. And then if we take a step back, we can look at kind of the hardware that software relies upon, and then encourage our students to think about all of the server farms and the environmental impacts of all of the generative AI that's running, for instance. So maybe thinking across the stack could be a really useful, and it has been the way I structured a couple classes, thinking from interface and code all the way down to hardware, to encourage students to think about a more ecological sense of the work that they're doing. And sometimes those methodologies of interpretation do translate surprisingly well across. So how does one do interpretation of a server farm, for instance, or of like a Bitcoin mining facility? So are there techniques of methodologies that actually translate in new ways across those different scales of analysis, I guess I could say.
Thank you. I think Tanisha replies with a thank you. I know this is a part of a much longer conversation, also a deeply complex one. I really appreciate your response. We'll take one more question and we'll close. Yes. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Julian from Utrecht University. I work as a scientific developer.
We need you to talk louder.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I work at Utrecht University as a scientific developer, and I actually wanted to make a comment on an early question about what can we do as individuals. Isn't this more in the hands of the big tech companies or the leaders at those companies? And I think something that people often don't realize is that the power dependency is in some ways the opposite way. Like the big tech companies depend on us as end users for their power. So I would like to take WhatsApp as an example. Everyone is on WhatsApp, or almost everyone is on WhatsApp. And it seems like a natural thing to do because everyone is on WhatsApp. So if you want to communicate with the people that are important to you, then WhatsApp is a very obvious choice. But if you think about, right, do you really need to use WhatsApp? Like if you do not, suppose you boycott WhatsApp, which you might do because it is owned by Facebook, now Meta, are you really no longer able to contact the people who matter to you? And in most cases, that's actually not true. You can still reach them through some other service or through email or through regular phone or something like that. So of course, that's much less convenient. If you actually use WhatsApp, you can reach anyone you want. And if you don't, then you have to figure out for every separate person how to reach them. But it is a little sacrifice that you can make for reasons that you stand behind. So that's something I wanted to offer as an alternative way to look at it. Thank you.
Josh, do I have time to offer like a 1-minute response to that, or are you out of time?
You can go ahead, yes.
Okay. One of the slides I skipped over was for community networks. I have had a colleague of mine with whom I taught my anthropology of network, was the founder of Community Tech New York and used to work for the New America Foundation, and they're kind of, I forget what the name of the division was, but it's about communities building their own internet infrastructure. In many cases, there are folks who live in kind of Appalachia or in the South Bronx or in other parts of the world that are not a profitable market to commercial service providers. So they just don't get high-speed internet. And in other cases, there are communities who are within kind of a potentially feasible market, but decide that they'd rather not have extractive data hoovering systems bringing internet into their homes. So they choose to build, there's a whole mesh, there's a mesh, Community Wireless Philadelphia, there's NYC Mesh. Lots of cities have built their own municipal or community wireless networks that are perhaps slower, less efficient, more full of friction, less easy to use. But those are choices and trade-offs that people make on principle because they want a system that actually is not about monetization and privatization and profit, for instance. So these are trade-offs that some communities are making, not only in terms of what app you use, whether you choose WhatsApp or not, but also just even the basic hardware. You opt for friction and some degree of inconvenience because there are ethical benefits to be gained.
Thank you for staying with us a little longer, Shannon.
Sure, thank you.
Full disclosure, oh my gosh, the week is almost over, yes. Full disclosure, I had the privilege of being in Shannon's class for media studies methods, and she entirely rewired my brain, as I hope we all feel that here today and forevermore with the recording. And I want to say thank you to Shannon once again.
Very much.
And and now Amanda.
Thank you so much, Shannon. That was wonderful. And I know we could all probably talk about this for the next, 20, 30 minutes. I also know that many of us were woken up this morning by 8 a.m. notifications about tornadoes, so you're probably a bit tired. But I hope you have had as wonderful a week as we have. It's been a true pleasure to host you. When I stood on the stage last year and talked about our hosting days 2024, and I promised you excitement, I didn't quite mean excitement in the biblical sense, like tornadoes and floods, but here we are. In all seriousness, we had a passionate vision that we really believed in of an inclusive and accessible conference. And we thank you for your patience, kindness, and generosity as our small team worked very, very hard to realize that vision. So on behalf of the Center for History and New Media and the local organizing team, I want to say thanks to all of you for coming. We would like to give you a hand of applause. And I say this with all sincerity, you made it all worth it. And to paraphrase the late, great Douglas Adams, so long and thanks for all the DH.